Welcome back to another episode of the Cycle Podcast, the show where we cover 4 trending MLB topics in 20 minutes or less. Joining me is Josh, a.k.a. Kablumski, back with us. We missed you. Good to have you back on the show. You did a little camping, spent some time with the fam, but now it's back to business, baby.
Priorities are in check right now, baby. I love it. I missed you guys. I missed you. I missed the fans. I missed everything about this show. So I'm pumped to be back. Thank you for having me back. Let's get this show started.
It's always your chair, Josh, the co-host. We're going to talk a little more predictions, which we started last week with Zach. By the way, thank you for filling in, Zach, if you're watching. We're doing a little ABS. We've got a fan comment that we're turning into a category. And as always, we finish with Who's Hot. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Last week, we talked division winners. This week, we're talking American League award winners. So I'll start us off. We're going to be doing Cy Young, MVP, and Rookie of the Year. And with the rule that we cannot choose Shohei Ohtani, Aaron Judge, Paul Skeens, or Tarek Skubal. So for my American League Cy Young, I'm going with Max Fried. Yankees bullpen blew a win for him tonight, but he is at 19.2 innings pitched with 14 Ks and a 1.35 ERA. Of course, he finished, I believe, 4th in Cy Young voting last year. He was brought in by the Yankees to be the number 2 to Garrett Cole. Garrett Cole goes down, and he proves that he is a legitimate ace. And I think even when Cole returns, he's still that number 1 option on a very good team who I, of course, didn't pick to make the playoffs. But
Smart
they're
man.
proving me wrong. Yeah, but start the season, they look darn good. He led the MLB with 19 wins. I know people don't care about wins as a pitcher stat anymore, but he also led the American League in win percentage. I still care about wins. If you're going out every start, giving your team an opportunity to win a game, that is still an important stat to me. For MVP, this one I think was probably the hardest out of all the awards out of both leagues. And I went Vladimir Guerrero Jr. He's coming off a MVP 13 finish in 2025, which frankly, he was better than that. He was elite in the postseason, and he's the best hitter on a really good team. I like the Blue Jays this year. I have them being the number 1 wild card. And a team that's probably going to be anchored by its pitching, or starting pitching, I could say. But with a weaker bullpen, I think the offense is going to need to step up to have success, and I expect them to. Now, on to my Rookie of the Year, who I moved out of Who's Hot in favor of putting him here. I've got Chase DeLauder, and I know we've got guys like Kevin McGonigal, Carter Jensen are all popular picks, but through 7 games, he's at 5 home runs, 8 RBIs, hitting .346 with a 1.293 OPS. He is on pace, and I calculated this out for us, for 115 home runs, 185 RBIs. So obviously he's going to come back down to earth. But like we were saying off the pod in our little pre-show chit-chat, that he could get to the All-Star break and have this shit locked up. If he's got 20 home runs at the break, 40 RBIs, and then he slows down in the second half, that's going to be a very tough dude to catch. Of course, you could have someone come on big in the second half and votes could skew in their favor. But like I said, he's going to get everyday playing time. Cleveland's outfield is not that good behind Stephen Kwan. I don't see anything pushing him out of an everyday role. So, Josh, I'll turn it right back over to you. Last 2 minutes is yours. Give me your predictions.
Yeah, no, first of all, those are great picks. I like the Max Fried one. I don't think Max Fried gets a lot of love as he should, because he does a lot for teams, right? He goes out there day in and day out when his number's called, and puts a good showing out there each and every time, especially in a high school field that they play on. For him to hold opponents to a good batting average against them and stuff like that, he definitely doesn't go unnoticed. My Cy Young, I went on the other coast, so to speak, and I went with Brian Wu. We're both pretty big fans of his. I love his mechanics. I've always been a fan of flawless, very simple, set, smooth mechanics, not a lot of jerkiness. And, the ball just comes out his hand with some vengeance on it. But no, he's part of a good pitching rotation, right? He's part of a good team that has aspirations and has visions of playing late in October. And if they want to do so, Brian Wu has to make sure he is what he just needs to be doing. Nothing more, nothing less. If he pitches his type of his standard of pitching, obviously his name is going to be thrown in the Cy Young, but I think that he will be a front runner. On the MVP side of things, we both spoke about Vladdy. I was leaning towards him. Great choice. I think that Toronto, like we spoke off the pod, they're gonna be there in October and late in the season. But I think they're gonna have a lot of bumps on the road, and I think that's where Vladdy kind of is gonna be the glue that they need and that veteran leadership that they need for that team to succeed and go deep into the playoffs. But my MVP, I went with J Ram. Not a flashy name, not a flashy guy. One that people are kind of getting tired of seeing at the top three, top five in the rankings of third base, hitting, whatever it may be. When you talk about third basemen in general, his name comes up as one of the best all around, hitting wise. And in Cleveland, like you just mentioned earlier, they're not that good. They're not going to be that good in that lineup. So like guys like your Delators and your Quans and your J Rams for that team are going to have to be the ones to set the tone for. But that team will not go or will not compete as far as division leaders without J Ram. So that's why I picked J Ram as my MVP. My rookie of the year. Another great choice by you, what you were talking about, but I had to go with Kevin McGonigal. I don't know if I'm saying that right. I think I am.
Yeah.
But I like this kid because I like gamers, John. I like guys that are scrappy ball players that are toolsy, like you mentioned off the pod. Great word. I definitely wrote that down because I feel like that rolled off the tongue well. But the guy plays well, man, and the guy adapts quickly. I watched him from his amateur days coming up throughout the ranks. He found a way to adapt quickly, but to stay consistent to where he is getting it early and often, so to speak, for lack of better terms. But if they're going to be making a push to October, he's going to have to be a big factor too for Detroit as well. So those are my three guys there.
And I agree with most of them, to be completely honest. Good picks. A lot of guys that I was thinking about when I was making this list, most notably Brian Wu.
Yeah,
Big, huge fan of Seattle in general. But with
same.
that, let's move on to our second topic. Next up, we're going to be talking about the implementation of ABS thus far in the 2026 season. And if you watch the show over the offseason, I spoke a lot about how I'm not a fan of ABS in general. And that has not changed at all for me. I hate it. I'm one of the people you probably see on social media talking it down. And I have a few reasons why. And thankfully, these are different reasons why than the last time we talked about it. So, just to start off, the overturn rate is about 54%. So, early in the season, players have been getting it right more often than umpires, but not at the rate that we think it is based on what we're seeing on social media, where obviously you see a lot of the bad ones. And the ABS fans are pointing to those as this is a great system. I don't like the ones that are, we're talking, you could barely fit a hair between the ball and the strike zone and they're getting overturned, especially when I want my hitters to be in a two strike approach. And as a coach, if a guy gets punched out looking on a close call, the first thing you're saying is you have to swing at that. And I saw Bobby Witt take one today, and he looks back, realizes he doesn't have a challenge, and has to walk off. And looking at it again, it was definitely a strike by ABS rules because it touched a little bit of the corner. And I'm not a guy either who wants to see a big game be decided on the back of one missed call by the home plate umpire, like we saw in the World Baseball Classic between the USA and the Dominican Republic. However, I don't like the way that fans are framing this in that, oh, these umpires are finally getting what they deserve. It's so embarrassing for them now to make all these calls wrong. When you have to understand, it is the hardest position in all of umpiring, refereeing in any major sport. Calling balls behind the plate, calling balls and strikes, I should say. Pitchers are filthy. Catchers have never been better at framing, and the umpire's job over the past 20 years has become harder and harder and harder. When you have broadcasts putting an arbitrary strike zone up on the screen that they admit isn't adjusted properly to taller hitters like Aaron Judge versus shorter hitters like Jose Altuve. So fans always think that box, that's the strike zone when it's not. Um, if we want to view this properly, it should be where we say, okay, change can be good, but this change is to help the home plate umpires with some of these extremely borderline calls in big moments. And I don't like, especially, seeing guys in the first two innings of games trying to overcall a borderline call. Have good plate discipline, fight off the close ones, and wait for your pitch to hit. That's what everybody's taught. And it just seems to be something where either players are trying to use it to get out of a pitch they definitely should have swung at. And fans, like I said, are using it as a way to pile on the umpires. Now, when I was bartending in St. Pete, I would sometimes get umpires to come in after games because we were a 3-minute walk from Tropicana Field. And a lot of them would ask that we put the replay on, and I always would. And one of the umpires had a tablet with him. He was watching pitch by pitch, how accurate he was, how far off he was. He missed one call that game. He sat until the 8th inning to watch that call, which, by the way, was completely inconsequential. It was like a 2-1 pitch in a game that was all but decided. But he watched it. He looked on his tablet. These are guys who care about the integrity of the game. And you obviously have your Angel Hernandez's, your C.B. Buckners, who have a worse rate than other umpires, but across the board, Major League umpires are exceptional. So go watch an ump cam sometime before you want to complain about it. Watch what it looks like when a 99-mile-an-hour cutter with 4 inches of movement is coming at you. It's nearly impossible, yet they're getting it right 92 to 93% of the time. And we have games multiple times a season where guys are getting it right 98 to 99% of the time. So stop piling on the umpires. Maybe look at the pitches that some of your favorite players are taking in 2-strike counts that are being challenged and ask yourself, last year, would Bobby Witt Jr. have swung at that? Would J-Rod or Aaron Judge have swung at that? The answer is usually yes. So worst case scenario, ABS is making your favorite players' plate discipline worse. And I don't like that, especially when guys start to get in their head and aren't even keeping track of how many challenges there are. And so far, just so everyone knows, only catchers have a positive rate. Only catchers are getting it right more often than they're getting it wrong. Batters are getting it wrong significantly more than they're getting it right. So just some food for thought. And Josh, I warned you ahead of time.
Yeah.
I was going to take up most of the time. So if you have
No.
a point to make, go ahead and make it.
No, I got a few, but I mean, you like always, you always hit it on the head, pretty solid there. And I didn't think you were gonna mention the main point, and I'm happy you finished it off and talking about my catchers getting it right, because that was the main thing that I wanted to talk about. Or the main point that I want to talk about was the percentage of right calls that the catchers are making. We got to remember, guys. Yeah, we got to remember too is that umpires are professionals, guys. They're the best of the best. They go to school, they go to academy, whatever it may be. They're professionals. That story that you just mentioned of that gentleman coming in the bar, that is a professional move. That is somebody that's taking their career and with a passion and trying to get better. And he is not the only one that's doing that. I'm willing to bet. So like we do, I agree with you. We do gotta watch how we talk about these umpires and how we just sham them and talk about bad about them and stuff like that. I think another problem is that these networks having that strike zone that you speak of, I think they need to take that out. I think that's messing up the game. I think that's messing up a lot of the communication that the fans are having within the game on socials and stuff like that. Because it's they're not seeing that. It's not live. So how can they really judge on that? Another thing that you mentioned that I want to bring up, especially for our next generation of ball players that are listening, or our younger crowd that listens to us, when you talk about the plate discipline that your best players have, you got to understand that not everybody has that, especially not the youth level, especially at the high school level and stuff like that. So their at bats are approached differently when they go up there. When they have a challenge in their pocket to utilize during that at bat. Young players, you don't have challenges. So those close pitches, fight them off, especially with a 2-strike count. We got to be more disciplined enough to know that that borderline pitch most likely is going to be called a strike. So we can't be taking that borderline pitch at this level, because none of us are professionals at this point in our life, that we have to be better batters and fight those off and or put them in play. Those borderline pitches are easily hittable pitches. So utilize that and be more disciplined and be better hitters.
And don't do what Bobby Witt Jr. did today. It drove me up the freaking wall. With that, let's move on to our third topic. You don't want to. It was embarrassing. So, like we say at the end of every podcast, we appreciate your comments, whether they be positive or negative. And we had a comment from a follower or a viewer, and I'll tag him or her down below. I don't think it was intended as a shot. I think they were just making a point. And they said, Toronto has a better staff than Boston, dude. They just broke a record for strikeouts to start the season. And that was referring to last week when I picked Boston as the winner of the American League East, based primarily on their pitching staff. Keep in mind, we did record that before Toronto broke the record for strikeouts to start a season. So I would say to that viewer, fair point. And when I was looking at the best staffs in the American League, I had 4 teams. I had the Blue Jays, I had Boston, I had the Mariners, and I had the Yankees. And the reason I didn't go with the Blue Jays is because Bieber, Savage, and Barrios were starting the season on the bench. And I've never been a huge Cease or Gossman fan. I don't want to say fan. I think they're good pitchers. I've never thought they were that elite tier. However, to start the season, their entire staff has been good top to bottom. And like I mentioned with those guys coming off of injured reserve, when you add them in with Cease and Gossman, that's a 5-man rotation that's pretty tough to beat. My main knock on them as a staff is going to be their bullpen. I don't know if Jeff Hoffman is the guy you want closing out games down the stretch. And I think that's an easy spot for them to fill come the trade deadline. With the Red Sox, proving our viewer right to start the year, Connolly Early has looked good. Obviously, Garrett Crochet is one of the best, if not the best in the biz. Ranger Suarez has not looked good. Brian Bayo hasn't looked good, and Sonny Gray haven't looked good. And that's that group of 5 that I had as being among the best staffs in Major League Baseball. I like their bullpen a lot better when you have Chapman, when you have Garrett Whitlock, among others. So top to bottom, I thought they were better. Now, to the Mariners and Yankees, I still think they're top 4. The Mariners obviously have a strong bullpen to go with another group of 5 that's among the best in the league. And the Yankees have looked great. Part of the reason why Max Fried was my pick for AL Cy Young. But thank you for your comment. We never mind turning friendly criticism into our content. So feel free to disagree as much as you want, and we may feature on the next episode. Josh, what do you think from what you've seen from Boston? I believe they're starting the season like 2-4 or 2-5. Could be even worse than that. It is 2-7. And that's been on the back of a mediocre offense combined with a pitching staff that isn't living up to expectations early in the season.
Yeah, I have no qualms with what, first of all, what our listener wrote us. I appreciate that. And like you mentioned, listeners and our followers, please let us know, any comments, because we got tough skin. We'll take constructive criticism.
We both work in the school system.
Yeah. So we let us have it, because there's no shame in our game. But no, going back to the actual topic here, Boston always seems to start off kind of slow. So I'm not too worried with that, unfortunately, because yes, they're in my division. But they always start off kind of slow for me. I always feel like they got a lot of hype, a lot of noise, a lot of a lot of big names around their camp, around spring training, and it always seems to take them a little bit longer for the wheels to start turning and for that train to start rolling down the track. So I'm not too worried with that. And that goes with their pitching staff too. Now, when you talk and you're comparing the two between Boston and Toronto, I think the big difference, which you pointed out, was the bullpen. I think the bullpen is the difference maker. I think starters, Toronto got it hands down. I truly believe once Barrios comes.
Let's break down those stats real quick. Can we play a little game? I'm sorry to cut you off.
Yeah.
I actually do want to compare those stats. So if I tell you Crochet and Suarez versus Gausman and Cease, top two, which one do you take?
Gausman and Cease.
Over Crochet and Suarez.
No. Oh, yeah. Crochet and Suarez, yes.
Okay, I was about to say you're out of your mind.
No.
Next three, Bieber, Savage, and Barrios versus Connolly Early, Brian Bayo, and Sonny Gray. I personally would take Boston on that. Toronto on that one.
I'm taking Toronto on that one as well. Barrios and yes.
And then bullpen, we're both in agreement it's Boston's bullpen.
Right. But like you mentioned, the trade deadline is going to be there. And you better believe that if they're anywhere near the division lead in any shape or form, they're going to be making a push, not just for a regular closer now, John. They're going to be getting a big-time name to really solidify that back end of that bullpen.
And Toronto, keep your hands off of my Lucas Ursag. A guy that's already being brought up in trade talks, even though he has like 5 years left on his contract. But I think both of those teams will make a move. If Toronto needs a closer, they'll go after it. If Boston needs another starter, they'll go after it. And this is absolutely a topic we can revisit come the end of the season. But with that, we've got to move on to Who's Hot, everybody's favorite topic. For my Who's Hot this week, I have none other than Joey Wiemer. And you have to love a guy bouncing around from multiple different teams. This is his fourth team. He's been up and down to the minors. And even if this doesn't stick, even if he's back in the minors by the beginning of June, he's still a guy who everybody's going to remember broke the record for most consecutive at-bats on base to start a regular season with 10 plate appearances. We remember the Eric Thames run. We remember the Aristides Aquino run. And that sort of lives in baseball lore and baseball memories. So Joey Wiemer, 20 years from now in a bar somewhere, there's going to be dudes going around just naming guys who got red hot for a month. And Joey Wiemer's going to be in that conversation. So congratulations on baseball immortality, Joey Wiemer. Through his first 5 games, which is where I pulled the stats from, 4 home runs, 4 RBI, 7 runs scored. At this point, he's hitting 476. It was 588 through 5. Right now, he has an OPS of 1434. It was after that run he went on 1781 with a 398 OPS plus. So 298% better than your average Major League Baseball batter. So congratulations. He's having one of the best starts in MLB history. Don't expect it to last, but I'd sure love it if it did, because I'm always rooting for the underdog. Josh, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, that's a good pick, and that's a great trivia question, too. I'm going to make sure I jot that one down. I went with a familiar foe, a familiar face, Randy Land. I pulled his numbers for the past 10 games, which I think he's only played 10 games. He started off red hot. He's only gotten, out of those 10 games, only 2 games he did not get a hit. He's batting .294 right now, 2 stolen bases. The only thing that doesn't stick out, or that sticks out, that's not a positive, so to speak, is his home runs. But again, when we look at, or at least when I look at who's hot, I want to see how they're affecting the team, and how is that affecting the team as a whole. And like we mentioned, we both are on the bandwagon for Seattle in all aspects, whether it be pitching, hitting, and defense. And if they're going to be making a run for it, Randy has to be the man. And he is on pace right now. still batting over 290 for the season. Another one that stands out to me too is his on base percentage is at 500 exactly. So that's something that's huge to help out his team and getting on base as many times as he can, especially where he's at in the lineup to help
Right in
his
the
team
middle of the
further.
order. Yeah, get
Help
on
his
base
team.
for the bottom four.
Mm-hmm. So Randy Land, to me, I don't really show too much love to Randy ever since he left Tampa. So I figure start off the year off right by showing him a little bit of love, and
I was going to take
Seattle
a
as a
cheap shot
whole.
at you, by the way. I was planning to take a cheap shot. Wouldn't you love to have that in Tampa Bay still?
I'll take
And by
anything
the
in Tampa
way,
Bay right now.
I have huge Who's Hot news to round out the
Uh-oh.
show. I, as the owner and operator of the Cycle Podcast, am unlocking Shohei Ohtani and Aaron Judge to start the year. If we have to, we'll lock them back up.
Okay.
So far, neither of them have made it on after our first Who's Hot of the regular season, but I expect them to be there before the end of the month. So with that, let's wrap it up. Thank you, as always, for watching the episode. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Josh,
Oh yeah.
thank you so much for being on the show. Anything
Thank
else
you.
you want to throw out there?
Yeah, man. Everybody, thank you for listening to us. Man, tell a friend to tell a friend about us. Make sure you tell a lot of people so we can get more people on here, more questions, more topics. And as the season keeps rolling, more shows will be coming at you. So make sure to tell a friend to tell a friend.
Yeah, we are poised to, at the end of April, move to weekly episodes. Obviously, you're coaching. I'm coaching at the middle school, and we have full-time jobs. But as we get closer to summer, we'll be returning to our weekly episodes. So stay tuned for that. We'll see you next time.